Hello everyone, Leemus here. Starting a new kind of series today, a new series I want to really focus on. So you know this channel obviously is called Not a Psychic Productions. So I wanted to get into and focus on some more superhero themed videos. You may have seen our Heroic Hunts videos that we did last Halloween. Hopefully I'll be doing some more of those coming up. But for starters, the new series that I'm wanting to start doing, new series of videos, is going to be called Origin Story. So it's basically going to be kind of like an introductory series for those of you maybe new to comics, new to Marvel, DC, whatever comics I happen to either know a little bit about or be able to research a little bit about. And so pretty much that's the gist. I'll give you guys a brief rundown of the character, their abilities, give you a rundown of their origins, their startings out, and a little bit of their history, and maybe a few quotes thrown in there, and just some fun little videos breaking down each character that I end up choosing, breaking down the characters that we discuss. So for starters, we're going to start with, as rightly so we should, with my favorite comic book character of all times. I mean, it's the one that I know the most about, the one I have the most passion for. So we're going to dive right in and start with my all-time favorite comic book superhero, character, what have you. Some people call him a villain, some people called him a hero, revolutionary, leader, X-Man, Scott Summers, aka Cyclops. So, Scott Summers is best known for his ability to fire optic blasts, or optic beams, from his eyes, which is basically a red concussive beam. A lot of people get it confused and thinking it's like a heat beam or heat vision. You know, he can't use it to like burn stuff. He can't cook your hot dogs on the grill or whatever other funny things a lot of people think. It's not. A lot of people want to compare it to Superman's heat vision, but it's actually not like Superman's heat vision. It is an actual concussive blast. So it's actually more, when it hits you, it doesn't burn, it punches. And I'm over here making this motion like remember when we were kids and you had those little like balloons that would have the rubber band, you could punch them? Yeah. It's like that, but in a laser beam that could punch you in the chest. Add to this, he is also resistant to his own blast. He has trajectory bending, which means, or he has the potential to trajectory bend. It's kind of one of those things that's not done much in the comics, but it's more or less alluded to or hinted to. Basically, this means that he can, or has the potential to will his beams to twist and bend around corners and curves and stuff without bouncing them off of other surfaces. Now, he does also have great uncanny spatial awareness, which means he is really good at the bank shots and bouncing his blast off of walls and other surfaces. But again, something that's a little known fact is that he has the potential to be able to bend it without, kind of like Darkseid's Omega beams, but that's a whole nother thing. So Nick Fury classifies, or his intelligence classified Scott as a mutant power level 7, but Apocalypse actually has come out to state that he believes Scott to be a alpha level mutant. So, you know, who are you going to believe? Nick Fury, the super spy, or the dude who literally is like the Egyptian god of mutants and like one of the first mutants that supposedly created mutant kind? You know, come on. Apocalypse is Apocalypse for a reason. And to be fair, Apocalypse has probably fought Cyclops more than Nick Fury, but I'm not a super spy or an Egyptian mutant god, so what do I know? Now, I will say most of this information that I have gathered today, I will say, is coming from MarvelFandom.com, Marvel.com, Wikipedia, and my own extensive knowledge of the character and love for the character and research and reading growing up as a fan. So, add to his list of skills and abilities, he's an expert pilot, an expert martial artist. He's telepathic resistant. He actually learned that from dating a couple telepaths, you know. It'll teach you a few things. Some random off-topic fun facts. He really loved listening to music and the radio, and he even worked as a DJ for a little while. apparently he also, in his downtime, he enjoyed watching Seinfeld. It was one of his favorite sitcom shows. So there you go. There you go. What's going on in here, Jerry? We're leading the X-Men in here, Jerry. That's what's happening in here. Okay, so let's get into a bit more of the origin and a bit more of the nitty-gritty. So Scott Summers was born under Major Chris Summers, aka Corsair. We'll get into that later, the Corsair part. Who was a pilot for the military. His mother, Catherine Ann, and his brother, Alex Summers, or Alexander Summers, who, aka Havoc. Get into that in another time. We'll hear about Scott. But his parents played a big part, and his brother a big part in his origin. So on their way back in their private plane from a family vacation, they're attacked by seemingly out of nowhere, Shi'ar ship. Now the Shi'ar is an alien race in Marvel Comics. It's a whole nother thing. They had beef with his dad, coming back to that aka Corsair thing. They shoot at the family's plane. It's on fire. It's going down. They only have one parachute because why not? Now maybe the other parachutes got damaged in the blast. I don't know, but it's one of those like typical kind of things. The plane's going down. We got one parachute. We got 4 people. What are we gonna do? So they put the 2 brothers together and they push the boys out of the plane. As they're falling, the plane blows up, and they're just like, oh my gosh, there goes mom and dad. And the plane, there goes family vacation. But essentially, little do they know, they were teleported off the plane. He'll see his parents again later down the road. Now, this is when their parachute catches on fire, because of course it does, because it wouldn't be a high-stakes origin story if it didn't continue gradually getting worse. But this is when his mutant powers first revealed themselves, and he fired an optic blast out of desperation and out of nowhere to kind of slow their descent to the ground so that they don't hit the ground and die. Now, unfortunately, they still come in pretty rough landing. Scott hits his head just the right angle, which damages the part of his brain that would have allowed him to control his mutant ability. So you got, people like Storm or even, Jean, who have really powerful abilities, but they can kind of choose when to use it. Storm, if you've ever seen Encanto, you know what I mean about the chick that makes it rain all the time. So like Storm, obviously she has a little more control. She can go into a room without it just start raining unless she wants it to. Scott gets hit really hard in the head, and now he no longer do that well. He no longer can control his optic blast, which it's going to be an issue. Also, the boys suffer trauma amnesia because they were shot out of the sky by an alien ship that came out of nowhere that watched their parents explode. Who wouldn't have trauma? So after the incident, they do earn the interest, if you will, of a mutant geneticist, scientist, mad scientist, if you will, creepy looking Mr. Sinister. This guy. This guy right here. You know him. You've seen him. Maybe. You are here for... maybe you've seen him. You are here for a mutant origin story, so... If you don't know who he is, well, that's another video. But essentially, he is a geneticist who's obsessed with mutant DNA and mad sciencing and creating crazy stuff. He's a mad scientist. He don't need much more reason or explanation. But he becomes obsessed with the Summers brothers because, they're mutant lineage, and he's obsessed with studying them. He believes that Scott is the more powerful brother, or the more potential brother. He believes that Scott has more potential. So essentially, he basically, he kind of takes over ownership of where they're at. And he sends Alex away to be adopted. He lets Alex get adopted and sends him away. Because he's like, well, if I separate him, Scott's going to be more emotionally vulnerable. Going to be easier to kind of peel away at those layers and see what's making him tick. And he was right. Scott's been through a lot of trauma. He's got the powers that he can't control. He's struggling a lot as it is, and then his brother gets taken away, his little brother, and so to make matters worse, he ends up having a real bad spell with his optic blast off the hospital roof, which in turn ends up pretty much knocking himself out into a coma. He wakes up a year later, is sent to an orphanage. The orphanage is owned by a guy named Mr. Milbury. Now, Mr. Milbury is continually running experiments and tests and trying to poke and prod at Scott, kind of like Sinister, kind of like a mad scientist. Well, that's because it is Mr. Sinister. And to make matters worse, Mr. Sinister not only disguises himself as the owner of the orphanage, he also sneaks in and disguises himself in his off hours as a guy named Lefty, who's another kid at the orphanage who continually bullies and picks on Scott and beats him up. He had a tough way, Cyclops did, come into, you're starting to paint a picture of this guy that would become the leader of the X-Men. So, eventually, Scott's powers, he starts getting real bad headaches, and he's still having trouble controlling his powers and stuff. So, Sinister actually disguises himself, again, as a specialist. As a specialist doctor, and he prescribes him his ruby quartz glasses, the actual shades with the ruby quartz lenses. Not the visor, mind you, that will come later, just the glasses. But still, it's a start. It helps. Unless, of course, the glasses get knocked off, and then you accidentally shoot some construction equipment that almost kills a bunch of people, and then you shoot it again, saving them, because the first blast was an accident, but that's not what they remember you for. So you go on the run, and you jump on a train, and you escape. Because that's exactly what Cyclops does, Scott Summers. He's not Cyclops yet. He's just a poor, terrified, trauma-filled, abused child. And his abuse don't stop there. While on the run, he runs into a guy named the Jack of Diamonds. Now, old Jack's a criminal, obviously. With a name like Jack of Diamonds, you got to be a, like a petty thief, criminal guy. And he sees opportunity in a kid that can shoot optic blasts out of his eyes. Because, hey, there's plenty of opportunity there. So, he tells Scott, hey, you're going to help me commit crime. Scott, he's a kid, but he's still a good kid. He's like, no, I don't want to do that. So Jack beats him up until he decides he's going to help him. Well, this gets, the authorities involved, obviously. They're now on his radar, but he's also on the radar of a man called Charles Xavier. Who's a mutant that has the ability of telepathy, and he's able to track down Scott and help wrench him away from there. Not only does he want to give him a place at his school for gifted youngsters, but he wants to make him the first member of a new team he's putting together called the X-Men. He claims it wasn't because his name is Charles Xavier and Professor X and all that stuff. Apparently it was because of the X gene or the X mutagen that gives mutants their powers, but still a bit on the nose. We'll come back to that later. Point is, he forms the X-Men, and starting with Scott, in a hope to train a team of young mutant superheroes that can help be a symbol of good and win people over for the mutant mankind harmony dream that Professor X has. Here he's joined by Jean Grey, aka Marvel Girl, Hank McCoy, aka Beast, Bobby Drake, aka Iceman, and Warren Worthington III, aka Angel. This team will become known as X-Men First Class. So when you get to see the classic blue and yellow jumpsuits that they wear, this was back when Iceman was more of a snowman, and back when Beast was more of just a really bulky, buff dude in spandex. He's more like gymnast. I couldn't think of a more clever name, but to be fair, they called him Beast. So there you go. Scott is a skilled tactician. He's a brilliant leader. He even had to use the danger room at one point when it's a whole story with Mastermind, where Mastermind had tricked the other X-Men into thinking Scott was a bad guy and thinking that he was the Phoenix. This was during the Dark Phoenix Saga, or after the Dark Phoenix Saga, around in there. And Wolverine, Colossus, Storm, Rogue, Shadowcat, a few others, all tried to attack Scott because, again, they thought he was the Phoenix in their defense. In his defense, he goes on the run through the X-Mansion. He escapes into the danger room and uses its ability to transform and change into whatever training they need. It turns the whole room into a jungle, like a dense, like Savage Land type jungle. And then one at a time, he disarms and takes out his fellow team members. And, like, he's by himself. He was already injured, by the way, too. He'd already been injured and just woke up from his own, like, coma, more or less, to have his own team members start attacking him. We're talking Wolverine, Colossus, Rogue, Storm. These are heavy-hitting X-Men. These aren't like, you know, it's not like he's training the newbies. No, he's going up against his toughest peers, and he survives them. You know, he's able to sweat it out and take him down. A lot of people kind of throw Cyclops under the radar because he has had such trauma and because he is such a stiff kind of tactician and leader. And he is a very no-nonsense guy. He actually, because of everything going on, you know, he has low self-esteem, he has confidence issues, has a very low opinion of himself. Now, this does change a little bit once he ends up getting with Emma Frost. She begins actually counseling him regularly, and then not only that, but just their relationship in general. He was a happier person, his self-esteem and confidence was better, he was a better leader because of it. You know, I mean, to be fair, you know, his other longtime fling did go up in flames. Crashed and burned. Enough puns, I get it. But he has been in himself and led the X-Men through some of their greatest battles and story arcs and earned his place in the superhero pantheon, in my opinion, and his spot as my all-time favorite comic character. I relate to him in a lot of ways, you know, and I really look up to him. And like I said, I grew up watching X-Men as a kid, the animated series, and the first comic that I ever received was an X-Men comic. The first comic that I ever bought with my own money when I got old enough was an X-Men comic. I've always been a lifelong X-Men fan, and as a kid, yeah, I had different favorites. Like every week, every episode, I had a new favorite X-Men. But as I got older, my true favorite came into sight, and since at least high school, I've had the same favorite all the way up till now, which is Cyclops. So now if we could, you know, maybe see him in the MCU, that would be great. Hopefully we get some news on that soon. I know there's a lot of rumors going around about the X-Men and mutants joining. There's even rumors about Cyclops joining. I will say, you know, I might do a fan cast. I recently did a Doctor Doom fan cast. I may do one for Cyclops. That might be fun. I may do a Doctor Doom origin story next for you guys. So, next thing I want to do is go over some of my favorite Cyclops quotes before we close this thing out. So the first one's a big one where he says, "I was blind to how the world worked, and then I met a man who taught me to see how things really were, and I loved him for it. And because I loved him, because I believed in him, and in a way worshipped him, I claimed the things that he had faith in as my own. He called it his dream. It was a good one, but the world, you see, the waking world, where we all live, is a killer of dreams, a destroyer of things you believe in. So when I grew older, I realized it was foolish to deify him. Honestly, it's unfair to expect that kind of perfection from anyone. After all, we're all flawed and imperfect. There is no real difference between any of us, no matter how much we believe that the lie that there is. You see, he wasn't a savior, he was just a man, a mutant, like me, and his dreams, which still make me smile to this day, are no more valid than anyone else's, including mine. I love the idea of that, the promise of it. So that's my story. I'm a dreamer. I'm an X-Man." Come on. That's a good quote. Other fun quotes that I really love is, he says, "No, not plan B, plan 2. Plan B implies we only have 26. Always be prepared. Always prepared." Another kind of deep one that I really like is, "The professor used to tell me the most important part of leading wasn't personality, tactics, or training. It was doing whatever it takes to get your team back alive." Again, that leadership quality and ability. Excellent. And lastly, the Avengers have their assemble, and Endgame delivered that line to us so beautifully in such an epic scene. So, Kevin Feige, if you're watching this, probably not. If you're watching this, please, from a diehard Marvel fan from youth, and an even further X-Men fan, even further Cyclops fan, give me that same cinematic moment of Avengers Assemble. If you can give me that, but have Cyclops surrounded by dozens of other X-Men, and he says his infamous line, "To me, my X-Men," you can call it a day. I can call it a day. I'll be happy when that happens. But until then, until we get that epic moment, there's only one thing left to do. And that's to put on our ruby quartz glasses or visors and wait.